Hey, welcome back for another week of having a chat, having a sit down, and having a bit of a listen, I guess, on your end, while I have a bit of a talk on my end. So you're listening to Josh Talks About Stuff, the show where Josh talks about stuff. That is what it is. So look, anyway, moving on, we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about this week. A bit of a different one too. We're gonna have a bit of a mixed bag. We covered some hot topics before. We've covered things like consumerism, freedom, all these different things. And last week we had a bit of a personal chat too. But I thought, why not mix it up and talk about something a little bit different this week? Now, before I get into anything, if you like the show, please give us a subscribe. If you like it as well, on top of that, like it enough to hit a like button, that would also be very helpful to me. And if you feel like it, I would say definitely click on that bell notification and you'll find us every week on Thursday. But hey, who am I to sit and ramble on about that stuff? We've got some stuff to talk about. So what I wanted to talk about this week is a bit different. I wish I had thrown this out in October. I didn't even think of this. Did I even have my show running then? I don't even remember. But I've got a bit of a weird one for you. So I've been, those who know me, I've been job hunting and looking for something a little bit different to get into, looking at different careers and whatnot. I am a healthcare professional, and we'll get into that later because I've got some things to talk about with that. And I was looking at doing nursing stuff again, but I thought, well, why not do something different? You know, I've done the same kind of things. I've done a whole bunch of different things, from sales to healthcare to you name it. I've done lots of different things, graphic design and whatnot. And I thought, well, there's nothing more I love than trying a new skill, or trying something different, or giving something else a go, because life is only so long. So why not try and fill it with as many interesting things as possible? One of the jobs I actually applied for recently was hosting laser tag. Well, that'd be kind of cool. But that's not the thing I wanted to get into. What I wanted to talk about, and why I mentioned October, is I want to talk about something spooky. I want to talk about ghosts and the paranormal. And maybe some psychic stuff as well I'll talk about too. And we might talk about some things like pseudoscience, and we'll talk about some other stuff like that as well. I've got some bike stuff I wanted to mention later on. And then a really important thing I wanted to cover at some point is failure. Now, that's something that concerns all of us. But look, we'll leave that until right at the end. The reason I wanted to mention ghosts is I was actually talking about this. And you know when you have an idea that kind of sticks with you for a while, and it kind of just works its way into your brain, and you think about it, and the more you think about it, the more real it becomes. I guess like doing this podcast, I've thought about it for a long time, and eventually it was just sort of like, oh, why not just do it? Now I'm going to point out that this idea I'm about to mention I didn't do, and we'll get to the reasons behind it as well, and we'll address that too. But I was thinking about this concept of ghosts and the supernatural. I'm going to point out as well, right before I get into anything, before any of you guys make any assumptions or anything like that, I am not a believer in ghosts or the supernatural or psychics or any of the paranormal things like that. But I'm interested in it. I find it interesting to look at from an outsider's point of view. I find it fun. I love reading spooky things too, and I absolutely love horror, and I've watched like a plethora of a ton of horror films and whatnot, and read all sorts of horrifying things and comics and books and all that kind of jazz too. And I don't know, I just think there's some kind of allure in it that I find that, without going down a trope like I want to believe or anything like that, but I always think it'd be pretty cool. Because sometimes, I guess life just isn't interesting enough sometimes that we need to make up a fantasy to make it feel cooler. But I think as a relatively creative person as well, back when I was into comic books and stuff, it really gave me, as in drawing and writing as well, it really gave me sort of something to sort of work into to try and make a spooky thing up, or write things about ghosts and monsters and all this kind of stuff. I thought it'd be kind of cool. But then this whole thing with like jobs and whatnot, I was thinking, like, I can't believe I was honestly thinking this about being a paranormal investigator. And I was thinking about how, like, I could get contracted to people's houses and go there and look for supernatural things, and how easy it would be too. Because the reality is I can pretty much guarantee with 100% certainty that there's no ghosts when I leave. Albeit there's probably no ghosts when I'm there either. So, and by probably I mean 100%, there would not be any ghosts because there are no ghosts. But hey, if you guys want to believe in that, or if you do believe in that, then no judgment on my end, because look, why not? It doesn't hurt anybody. I don't think believing in anything like that, whether it's ghosts or I'm not going to try and put this on the same plane, but ghosts or religion or you name it or whatever it is that you believe in, I think if you've got a reason to believe that and it means something to you, then go for it. As long as your beliefs don't impact anyone else and they don't hurt anyone, and that's a big reason why I wanted to bring this up today. It's not a hot topic like we've talked about in the past, but I think it can be a little bit of a hot topic too. So, what is the whole allure of it? Why would I want to be a ghost hunter? Well, here's a thing that's kind of horrible to admit, but I thought it'd be easy money because the reality is, I mean, if there's a calling for this job in general anyway, if people honestly think that there was like a ghost or a supernatural being in their house, I was thinking like all I would need to do is bring in like a Geiger counter. You guys know what that is? So for those who don't, a Geiger counter or Giga counter, or I don't know how it's pronounced. It's basically a thing that it will it's an electronic device and it croaks and makes like a horrible static sounding thing. It's very similar to like a gas finder. I've actually got a gas finder as well. So you use it for finding like any kind of dangerous gas leaks or anything like that. And you'll hear this thing with a little electrical beeping noise. It'll have like a click, 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 and so on. It sounds like that. And this one's for finding like radioactive isotopes and whatnot. That's a Geiger counter. I was thinking like an old Soviet one of those, because people don't know what that is. You could bring it in there and say it's like an ectoplasmic finder of some sorts. It detects ghost beings having been in the vicinity. And I was thinking like a car knock sensor, headphones and things, bring them as well. Or like a radio scanner or like a busted radio that picks up static. Just little things like that you could bring into people's homes and or like a black light, and with a black light, you guys know what that finds. Some horrible things, but if you put like a black light, like a flashlight black light, into like a lightsaber, like a toy lightsaber hilt or something like that, you could say it's like an ectoplasmic finder, and you could use it to find traces of ghosts, which will probably be some horrible bodily fluid that you found instead, but never mind that. And I got so excited about this idea, and then it dawned on me like how unethical it is, because I know it sounds weird like saying it's unethical when it's people are willing to pay for this, but the thing is I don't actually believe in any of this stuff, which means that I would just be fleecing people for money, and it started to make me kind of feel sick that it puts me into the same kind of boat as, say, or like I mentioned, what are they called? Psychics. And people like that, mediums, all those kind of people. I'm actually pretty passionately against all of that. I know like it sounds on face value like, oh, well, who does it really hurt? I think it can damage a lot of people, because the unethical part to me is it plays with people's emotions. And people believe in things and they think, and a lot of these people, it's not that they believe in the psychics or anything like that, or the ghost hunters or anything. It's that there's something else that's really the cause there, something else that's bigger than that. It might be that these people are broken on some level, and I don't mean that in like a mean way. What I mean is like emotionally, there might be something that's just not right, that these people have lost someone. They might be grieving. They might be in despair of some sort, or they might just be looking for some answer, or they've had some horrible mental breakdown or some personal crisis, and they just want an answer, or they want to believe in something, so they look for things to put their faith into. Maybe something horrible happened they saw, and they just don't know how to justify it, and they're looking for answers, and they come to these people, these mediums, who fleece them for cash, and it's funny how they do it too. And I mean peculiar how they do it. It's interesting. A lot of them use different things like cold reading and so on. So a bit of a crash course. I'm no expert on NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which is, it's a form of manipulation. You see it in like big talks. I don't want to say like TED Talks, but those motivational speakers will tend to use things like this, where they'll try and get people into like a form of that. This is not what mediums do so much, but a form of this manipulation where they get people to, stand up, sit down, bow, do all these things. Do everybody put your hands together, do this. And they're getting people into a state of mental suggestion where they're constantly building these rhythmic things over and over. They'll have music queued up, and they'll get Pavlovian style conditioning going. People, and when they hear this tone, it anchors a emotional response to it, and people feel that way, and they can manipulate people as a result. Now, psychics and mediums and all those kind of different people, they don't necessarily use that, but they use another form of cold reading as well, or neuro-linguistic programming, and often they'll use things like very open general statements. It's similar to what you see in like tarot card reading, or the most common one, which is somewhat socially acceptable, is the star sign one, whatever it's called, astrology. I forget. Anyway, you see it in that, and what ends up happening is you'll see something along the lines of, say, sometimes you might be a person who feels insecure around new people. Does that sound right? And they'll say, yeah, I do feel that way. I do feel insecure around new people. Because who doesn't? It's a general statement. Or they'll talk about like reaching like a loved one or something. And they'll say things like, for instance, I'm picking up something like an older male who, did someone in your family have like a heart condition? Or I'm sensing something around the heart, something like that. Maybe a broken heart. Maybe it's and right there, you've gone from two extremes. You've gone from like cardiac issues or pulmonary issues and so on, which are extremely common, very, very common. Everyone's got a relative who's had some kind of cardiac issue, or equal to that, everyone knows someone who's had a broken heart, so to speak. Maybe people have had a family member divorced, and already you've captured two whole different niches of people who are struggling in some form or another, and then that person will generally say yes. And right then, in that moment where they say, yeah, my uncle Trevor, then that's when they know they've got him. Because this person who wants to believe is now putting out an offer. They're putting out a verbal offer. They don't even realize they've done it themselves. But suddenly, this medium, they know, okay, well, now we're on the right path. We know based on the way that they've answered, they had a certain relationship, and they're constantly reading them. And they'll start going from these big sort of risky questions, which could be hit and miss. You've seen that on those medium shows where people will say, like, I'm sensing someone with a family member who may have died. I'm getting like a strong T, maybe it's a V, maybe it's a G, and as they're throwing these out, they're just looking for anyone who has like an emotional response. And when they see that look in their eyes, then they'll capture that and they'll go, yep, it's definitely G. G, I'm really getting a strong feeling. G, grandma, granddad, grandfather, and they'll see some nods or something like that. And they're looking for these little micro suggestions of these little things of people, these little suggestions and offers that people give. When I say offers, it's an acting term when you see someone in improv and they'll throw you an offer, meaning they might make a suggestion, like a physical suggestion to you. They might suggest with a prop. Then you can take that offer and then do something else with it. That's a whole different thing. I'm not here to talk about acting or anything like that, but I am here to talk about this whole thing with ghosts and mediums and so on. Because what this kind of relays into, this whole idea of scamming and whatnot, is I think it really captures this mentality of being able to abuse that condition that people are in. I saw this in sales, because the whole idea behind sales is you create an emotional response from someone. And when you get that emotional response, it's like casting out a line, and then you can feel a little tug on it, and that's when you start reeling in, because you've got someone. You've got that emotional response, and it's something where, it means something to them. And when you've got someone who's looking for an answer, and this is different from sales, but I guess it is a sale in itself, but when you've got someone who's looking for this, whether it's some kind of peace of mind or anything like that, you can kind of keep them on that line. Where I'm going with that is, you know that these people have like deep-seated emotional problems or whatever it might be. So then you can kind of get to that point of, well, our time is up, but I definitely feel that we have more progress here. And I don't want to point the finger and say psychologists do this too, but it's something that could easily be exploited. But the difference is with psychology, there is like ethics that get studied with that too. And it's a regulated industry, but I don't think that this idea of paranormal stuff is regulated in any way, because in reality, the only thing I think that we really have here is the business to be declared as like entertainment. So that way they can avoid fraud. That on some level they'll have some kind of scripting somewhere or something written down that says that this is for entertainment practices only. None of the stuff that the medium says can be proved to be or is sound advice or anything like that. But the problem with that is the people that go there, they're not paying attention to any of that because they've made their mind up that they're going to be getting something from this. And I just find that sad. It's just that, like, why do we believe in this stuff? I guess because, yeah, it's more interesting. It's similar to conspiracy theories as well, because people will get into like conspiracy theories which are wild and outrageous. I'm not going to name any conspiracy theories because I don't want to alienate anyone. But the reality is that sometimes the conspiracies are just far more interesting than reality. And it gives us something to look at. It makes us feel important. It makes us feel like we're the ones who are solving this mystery on our own. We're part of a movement. It's like any subculture. Where you're part of a movement, and everyone wants to feel like they're accepted. Everyone wants to feel like they're part of something. Do you ever meet someone that you kind of think is interesting or cool or whatnot? And they are. They probably are fantastic people and really interesting. And they might dress unique and they might dress, in a certain way or do certain things or wear certain makeup and whatnot. And you think, wow, this person's really unique. And then you go to like an event with them and you realize everyone dresses like that and it's just a uniform. It might just be like a type of, I don't know, like some punk rock thing or rockabilly, or they're usually music things like that. But there's some kind of subculture. And there's nothing wrong with that because everyone's got a people and people want to be part of that community because it gives them a sense of worth, that they feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves. Same with religion, same with whatever it is, or believing in ghosts. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just easy to exploit people that fall into that. Whether it is a subculture like that or heavy metal or something, and you got people wanting to buy like denim vests and you can charge through the roof. Remember back in the 90s that happened when I was going to say Silverchair, but I guess Silverchair was an offshoot of that. But like, you're looking at things like Nirvana and whatnot. And when that was really big, the way that Kurt Cobain dressed in his, flannelette tops and whatnot, then suddenly you had like retailers selling what were essentially op shop clothes, which are like secondhand type, Goodwill type places. You're selling things like that, but you're selling them at premiums like $60 to $100 for designer flannelette tops, which were just farmer clothes to begin with. Just cheap stuff. Because it's easy to exploit people who want to find that look, want to fit in. And sometimes the simplest answer really is, I guess some people want to believe these things because it's something they can't explain and they desperately want an explanation for it. And it's easy just to say it was a ghost. It was a paranormal thing. It was a spooky thing or an alien or whatever it is. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. If it doesn't affect anyone else, but just know that because of that, it makes it far easier to be exploited. Because the biggest issue with a lot of that is all of these different industries, and like I keep beating home. This is why I didn't want to do it, because I thought it was unethical. It's because it goes against one major principle I've got, which is, and I guess this is different for me because I came from a background in healthcare as well, which is all based around evidence-based practice. So what is that? What is evidence-based practice? It's about as simple as it sounds. It's the idea that essentially that all of your practices that you do, the way that you administer care to people or you administer whatever it is, whether it's advice or whatnot, it's all based on evidence. It's based on testing. It's things that can be quantified in their research, and everything is brought to, a scientific idea or a scientific theory it's based on. It's something that can be measured, it can be quantified, and it can be proven, to work again and again and again. So it's all about research and whatnot. But a lot of these things don't go off evidence-based practice. They'll go off anecdotal evidence. And I put evidence in quotations. You can't see my hands, but they're doing massive quotations. The bunny rabbit-eared finger ones, or whatever they're called. Anyway, I was going to say that based on that, like that whole evidence-based practice thing versus anecdotal, it's frustrating that people say anecdote, or the phrase is anecdotal evidence, because it's like a misnomer or an oxymoron, because it's not really evidence-based. It's not really evidence at all. You know, it's an anecdote. It's he said, she said, they said. It's this idea that because someone's friend said it worked for them, and who knows? What if it was a placebo effect? What if they had something else that was working for them in general that was separate to that? It's kind of funny because I know of someone who ended up with a horrible back injury, and I'm not going to say why because I really don't want to implicate this person or have them feel like they've been outed or anything like that. But I did know someone who had a back injury and it was quite severe, and they tried everything to sort it out, and they ended up having spinal surgery on it, and they ended up getting it fixed, which is great. But what they took away from that is, despite the surgery and everything, they started at the same time doing all these alternative therapies with like essential oils and crystals and all this kind of other stuff like that, or acupuncture and or chiropractic and all these things which aren't what we call evidence-based practice, because there is no real research to suggest that they make any fundamental difference to you. But because he was trying all these different things alongside the surgery and the physio, he made up his mind that based on his recovery and how well he did with the recovery, he ignored one half of it, which was all of the surgical side and the post-surgery rehab and all that kind of stuff, but only paid attention to the alternative therapies. And that's why I think this whole non-evidence-based practice side of things can actually be kind of dangerous. And it can be quite scary, to be honest, because I've seen this as well from a care point of view when I worked in healthcare. And it was actually kind of terrifying that you would see people who have, treatable illnesses that they could get some sort of radiation therapy for, whether it's chemo or whatnot, or whether, it might be cancer, or they might be reducing the size of a tumor or something, but instead they drink Chinese tea because they're told by their friends, uncles, mate, that essentially doing that will basically do the same thing. And what would these doctors know? What would these surgeons know, or these specialists know? They wouldn't know anything. But you know what? You know who would know about it? This tea that's been around for thousands of years, way longer than the doctors have been around. And that's the logic. So then and it's horrible because you can't force people to, engage in therapies and whatnot. But what's horrible about it is I've seen people wither and die purely because they wanted to follow this alternative medicine side. You can tell you there's famous people who have been down this road too. Look at Steve Jobs as well. What was it, pancreatic cancer or something like that? And he went down the alternative therapy side of things, and look where that ended up. Yeah, it's horrible. But a lot of these places, they'll try and fleece you into it. I'm not necessarily saying that a lot of them are scams. Like, I'm not saying that like chiropractors are scams, or that like crystal therapy or magnet therapy or acupuncture or any of these things are scams, so to speak, because I don't think they're intentionally deceitful, but they're not evidence-based practice. So a lot of them will try and, well, not a lot of them, it's a horrible way to sort of say that because I don't want to set the wrong expectation, but there's a percentage of them out there which will work outside their wheelhouse. They're not medical professionals in the regard where they actually stop at where their scope of practice ends. They'll go above and beyond that. And that's kind of dangerous when you end up with someone saying that based on, say, spinal manipulation can stop you from having your you don't need to have treatment for Hep C or anything like that, or you don't need to use your dialysis machine anymore because you can fix it with a massage. That is terrifying. But
people are so willing to believe that there's an alternative way out there. And this is, once again, hitting home with that same thing of people can't explain something, so they'll look for a solution. So they'll latch on to different ideas because it's more interesting to believe. It's more grand. It's better to believe that this alternative thing that's not based in any kind of evidence or anything is a better way to go. And it's purely based on this idea that, I guess, because people don't know and they want to believe that there's a better way, even though there might be the best way that they were on, they'll ditch that for something else based on what? Based on nothing. And you end up with these, and going back to like psychics and whatnot, where there's, I guess we'll cover that, but these charlatans will come along and they'll just take people's money. And I don't want to necessarily say scam, but I guess I've used scam already. I've mentioned that a few times. But it's the only real word I can say because you think of the ethics of it, because you can define what a scam is, really. And, it's dishonest. It's an intentional deception that is there to leverage something from these people, to leverage whatever it is, whether it's money or advice or there's a conflict of interest somewhere and they want to gain something from you. To me, it's dirty. It doesn't make me feel good. So that's why I decided to go against my plan of ghost hunting. Not that there's probably even a market for that, but it is so niche. I kind of wonder whether people actually would pay through their teeth for that. Because I know people pay through their teeth for tarot card readings and all these different things like that. But it is what it is. But look, I wanted to get into bikes as well today. I did say we would come back to that. So I was riding my bike the other day and it was just a beautiful day, and I went out and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go cruising for the sake of it. And I haven't done that in a while. Normally I'll have a destination in mind, whether it's like a twisty road or whatever, but I thought, you know what, we're not setting a destination today. Today is just going to be an open day where I can just cruise to wherever I go, just focus on the road in front of me. And you know what? All I'm doing is just focusing on cars, focusing on setting up corners, focusing on what I'm doing in the moment. But we don't necessarily have to have a destination. Wherever the road takes me. And I ended up at the beach. It was quite nice. And then this thought dawned on me about probably half an hour into it. And I realized, well, I guess maybe a CBR 1000 isn't the greatest bike for this. I love my bike. I love it to pieces. It's fantastic. Especially now I've got the sprocket on it. I love the brakes on it too. Oh, man. Especially with those braided lines, you can just launch it into a corner on the anchors and it's amazing. But I realized the things that I kind of miss is having... Miss is not the right word because I've only ever owned sport bikes. I've never had anything comfortable. But I wouldn't mind something that's just more comfortable. And I just started toying with the idea of maybe, I hate saying this, maybe trading it. Not to a dealership, but trading it with just someone privately. I don't really want to sell it, and I don't think I can bring myself to sell it. But this idea of trading it into someone else and just doing a swap, whether it's cash my way or their way, and buying essentially a naked sport bike. I think I want the same thing out of it. I want something that's got relatively long stroke with a lot of torque in it, with a pretty close ratio gearbox. I want something that I can still throw around twisty mountain roads or Great Ocean Road or beaches and all sorts of things like that. Something sporty with lots of brakes in it, lots of grunt. Don't really care about top speed anymore. Doesn't really faze me. And I guess it hasn't fazed me for a really long period of time anyway, because I'm not one of those people who likes to go 300 Ks or anything like that. Especially given the fact that it's public roads too. It's so dangerous out there. It's so easy to have an accident. And if you've been it out there, and I've come off bikes before, and I can tell you what, it hurts. It hurts a lot, and it hurts for a very long time too. Recovery ain't great. So, what kind of bikes would be next? Well, I don't know. It's kind of where I got to. I was thinking about, because I've got this principle which I stick to, and it's kind of silly because it's the opposite. It's so arbitrary, but it's the opposite of me with cars. So with cars, I just have a big interest in lots of different vehicles. And for those who know me, and I've mentioned this in the past, I've got a Mazda MX-5. I've got an NA6, if you guys know what that is. A 1.6 Roadster thing. And I've had like an ED Civic before that, and a bunch of other things. And I love cars, and I've driven many, many cars. Oh gosh, I can't even think about how many cars I've driven. It's ridiculous. But the thing is, like, I could own anything, and I've checked out many different cars as well with the intention to buy. And sadly, a lot of them didn't end up going anywhere because the cars themselves are just garbage. But that's what happens when you're looking at private sales. But the thing is, with cars, I'm a little bit different because I can happily own like an old 80s, Japanese car, like I don't know, like a Cressida or something like that. Or I can own like a late model car or whatnot. As long as it's whatever it is, I don't care. But for some reason, I have this thing with bikes where I set myself a rule where it has to be, each model I get has to be newer than the last. And I attribute that to the fact that bikes technology has just rapidly, just from like 2000 onwards, and I guess you could even say this from like the 80s onwards, or even the 70s onwards, the technology has just rapidly increased, and the stuff that comes out with them, every single year model virtually of bike is just more technology thrown at it. So I've got a 2012, so it has to be, my prerequisite is it has to be later than 2012, or even. So I can own a 2012 bike, but nothing further back. I know it's arbitrary, and I know I'm probably missing out on a lot of classics on it, but it just is what it is. And I've kind of gotten used to having a leader bike now too. I really love it. They make me happy. I just love the torque. Like I said, it's not the power that really it gets me into it, but it's the torque of it. So I was thinking, well, what kind of like bigger bikes can I get that are a naked bike with something with a more upright sort of sitting position? And I've come to the conclusion there's some things I want in bikes. Now my Fireblade's pretty raw. I've got no ABS, none of that kind of stuff. It's fuel injected, and that's about it. And it's got a steering damper as well, but not really a whole lot of technology. And I don't mind that. Technology doesn't make the bike, but I think these days, as I've gotten older, there's little things that I want, and I primarily street ride too, or exclusively street ride, I should say. So that being said, the big thing I really want out of it, I think, is ABS. And then I really want to have something with traction control as well these days, because being like an all-weather rider in the wet or whatever, I actually think traction control is something that can save your life. I've had it engage on mates' bikes, and I've been on my bike too, when I've come out of corners and things, and there's been squiggly lines on the road like tar snakes, or whether it's just the painted lines. In Australia, we use like a silicon-based paint, which really annoys me that they use that for all of the things. And yeah, it's hard wearing. Thing is, there's no grip, especially when you're on a motorbike. It's like hitting a tram track when you go over those. And I've binned it on one of those, and tell you what, I said this before, it really hurts. I high-sided it on one of those. I was going around a corner, and yeah, I was going too quick, and I can admit fault on that. But when I came to that, the rear end just slid out the second I got onto that little white line on the road, and then gripped in again, and then that was it. It was just over. It flicked me into the air, and man, when you go up in the air, when you come down, you don't really have much forwards momentum. It's all vertical. So you come down and you don't slide, you just hit the deck, and it's like hitting with a ton of bricks. It's like being hit with a cricket bat. It's not fun. Really, really hurt. So that to me, like traction control and the idea of having ABS, big lifesavers. Because, a lot of people will talk about ABS, and I think I've maybe even mentioned this in the previous cast as well. The idea that, yeah, in theory, yeah, I'm sure you could probably outbrake ABS, if you're a good enough rider. But in 100% of conditions, because I've had lockups on the road too, and I've locked up the front end. I've locked up the front end coming into a corner. And yeah, you can make the argument, like me, for instance, that all you need to do is let off the brakes and you'll unlock the brakes and you can get back on if you need to. Yeah, you can do that. But what happens in a scenario where something unexpected happens? That was just me going into a corner too aggressively, and I was trail braking, and I just anchored on a little bit too hard, and that was me. And I shouldn't have been doing that, and lesson learned. I was going a little bit too hard for the public road. And that's on me. I can live with that. But what happens if it was an emergency scenario, and what if I came around a blind corner and say there was a child on the road, or there was a big tree right across it? When those scenarios happen, if you're just suddenly panic brake, and yeah, there's probably no reason to panic brake, but the thing is, we're not in a perfect world. We're not all perfect riders, and we can't all just have a perfect response every time, because things happen. We get mentally fatigued. And if you're out on a road where, it might be peak hour traffic, and you're just getting mentally flogged out, and you're almost home, and something like that happens, and you just panic in the moment because you just don't have that mental fortitude to keep continuing the same way. Your reaction time is not as good. You're tired. Maybe it's been a long day at the office and your bike is your only transport and you're commuting home on it and it's been really bad and you haven't had a chance to, and you're going straight to another job. Something like that happens. Your concentration lapses, or even you could be doing like a 5-6 hour run through lots of crazy, twisty canyon roads and so on. And you come to a point where you're finally out of it and you're finally, you're letting your guard down and you're just wired. You start getting slower and slower and slower and you just come through a corner and maybe you just didn't pay attention because something just got by you. And it happens. In a perfect world, it shouldn't happen. But we don't live in a perfect world. These things don't happen like that. And yeah, you could grab a handful of brake, or in the most common case, what if you're a new rider and you're not used to it and something happens and you target fixate and you slam on that brake, and that ABS system could be between you and a wheelchair. So that's why I'm big on ABS and that's why I want it. It's a big one for me. The other thing I want to, preferable, it's not essential, but I'd like something that's ride-by-wire as well, just because I like the idea of having an auto blipper. But the bikes themselves, I'm stuck between a few. I was looking at like a Tuono or something like that, but here where I live in Australia, getting parts and stuff for an Aprilia or a Ducati or BMW or anything Euro, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic as well, ordering parts in, it's a huge issue. I think Moto Guzzi, I think it is, there's a huge backlog. I think it's a 4-month wait on anything. So, and that's just because it's from Europe. It is what it is. There's not much you can do about it. And then think about how the pandemic hit Italy as well, and looking at Italian companies and their manufacturing. Yeah, geez, trying to get parts from any of them might actually be a really big ask. So I thought for longevity of it, maybe I might avoid the Italian stuff. So I started looking at Japanese things as well. Ultimately, I've mentioned this time and time again that I'd like a Triumph, but it's a little bit outside my budget. So I was looking at Yamaha's, like the MT-10. Amazing bike in all regards. I haven't really heard anything negative about it. I have heard that there's an issue with the throttle though. Some people say it's got a snatchy throttle, that it's not as smooth as the throttle that's on the R1, despite having the same engine, well, a reworked engine with more bottom end and whatnot on it, but essentially based off the same engine, same frame, same wheels, same brakes, same everything else. So I thought, I don't know, and I can live with that. The thing I can't live with though is that front end. I really hate it. I know. A lot of people like that. People are going to hate this too, because I hate the H2 and I hate the Z1000 as well. I'm a stickler just for single headlight, nice looking front end bikes. Like simple, I guess I mean. Like if it had the same front end as, say, like the old SV or something like that, the SV1000s with a single round headlight on it, or even, I'll tell you what, if they made an XSR of the MT-10, I would take that hands down any day. That would be a dream bike. So I thought about how I would have my MT-10, and if anyone has done this before, please show me a photo because I'd kill to see it. The first thing I'd do would be a R1 tail conversion, and because I have the same subframe in it as well, well, I think the subframe might be different, but the same frame of the bike. The subframe can be swapped into it, and I've seen it done before, and it looks perfect. But that front end, ugh. I reckon if someone put an XSR 900 front end onto an MT-10, perfect bike, instantly, I take it, straight away. But it's a lot of money to spend on something that I don't really like the look of. So I guess the bike I keep coming back to all the time is the GSX S1000. I love the fact there's so many things, and having ridden these bikes before, I absolutely love them. It's so simple too. It's this beautiful looking, simplistic, single headlighted, bit modern looking at the front for my liking, but I can deal with it. I think the styling is pretty cool. Very, very reminiscent of that kind of era of like the CB1000R of the time as well, except it doesn't look like it's wearing a gas mask or looks like a bull ant or anything like that. I like the look of it. I like the fact it's got multi-stage traction control. That's a huge one for me. It's a win. ABS as well. The other thing too is it's got these beautiful Renthal fat bars on it. So you've got this amazing sitting position. You've got so much torque, and the torque in that bike is beautiful. So it's got the K5 or 05 GSXR 1000 engine in it, and that thing pulls like a train. Not the most powerful engine, but for a street bike, I can't think of a better bike. Bang for buck on those things is crazy. So I'm on the fence. I think that if I was to upgrade, I'd probably swap out the Fireblade for a GSX S1000. But I don't know. I'm just so. It's a hard question to answer because it would be better, and I know it would be objectively better for everything I want to do on the bike. It's just that I've got an emotional attachment now to the CBR, and I don't want to give it up. So if anyone knows what that's like, it's frustrating. I want to move on, but I feel like I can't. So yeah, if you got any other suggestions of bikes, let me know. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is a big one, and I think this is something that we all struggle with, which is failure. And it's something that happens to us all. It happens in our everyday life. Anytime we want something and we can't, you can't achieve it, or you can't get close to it, or something happens, or you fall short of it, whether it's something as simple as trying to, I don't know, build something and you break it, or you're working on something and maybe you apply for a job and you don't get it. And I've been thinking about a lot about how to deal with failure because sometimes it's catastrophic. And I've been in stages as well where there's something I've wanted and I've not been able to get it, and I've poured everything into it. I've put in all my time, all my effort, my mental resources into this thing, and it either fails, it blows up, or it's a drawing that I've spent ages in, and at the end I make a mistake and I've ruined the entire thing and it feels like it's for nothing. It's painful. And it should never not be. I mean, it's painful because you care about it and you invest so much of yourself into things, and when they don't work out, it's devastating. But here's the thing, it's not the end of the world, and this is why. I think failure is good because it teaches you what didn't work. And I think not enough people talk about this. I think what didn't work is just as important as what does work. Because that way you get a baseline. You can benchmark, okay, well, this is what did work, but now I know what not to do next time. And that's the thing. You're still alive. You still get a chance to have another next time. It's never over until you throw the towel in and quit. And I mean, quitting's a whole nother thing. I guess we can even do a whole show on quitting, to be honest, because I think there's a lot of stigma to that. The idea that, you should keep going no matter what, even if it's meaningless to you. But the idea of quitting is giving up. But that's a conversation for another day. But going back to failure, though, I didn't want to do like a huge show on this because it is only just really a side note. It's really this idea that if something goes wrong, it's not the end. So how do you mitigate that? How do you deal with that at the end of the day? And this is such a really simple solution, and it works for me. And I guess I can only really speak from my personal experience of how I deal with it. Set up some tasks during the day which you can achieve, so that way, if all goes wrong and this big thing that you're trying to work on, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter because you've achieved all these other things. Whether it's, say, you couldn't get a job, or you failed your interview, or you didn't get your, something didn't go wrong, you failed your driver's license, or something like that. Well, set another goal. Like, for instance, today, I had some things go wrong early in the day, and it's not the end of the world because, you know what? I went out and I did some gardening today, and it doesn't sound like much, but I can look back on it and I did heaps. I put a couple of hours into it and I smashed it out and I made the garden look amazing. And I'm not even a gardener. I don't really even enjoy it. Well, I didn't think I enjoyed it, but when I stood back and at least saw it, you know what? When I go to bed tonight, I can at least look back and say, I achieved that. I was able to get that gardening done. I was able to do this job hunt. I was able to get my video editing done and get this my podcast uploaded, or I was able to make a recording like I'm doing right now, and that's it. I've been able to take pride in that, and I think it's so important. And I know we're getting to a wrap now on this episode, and we're coming to an end. I don't want to run over time or anything like that, but I just really want to hit this home just one last time that if you really want to try and build up that sense of confidence, because I think that's everything, and that's how you handle failure, is through confidence and building that self-esteem. Try and take pride in the little things to try and make those small achievements, because it doesn't seem like much, but all of those small achievements when you can look back and say, yeah, I did that, or yeah, at least I succeeded in all these other little areas, you can look back and the day is not a write-off anymore. At least something practical happened. At least you worked on something, or you got one of your goals done. So that's all I really wanted to leave you with today. And that brings us to an end of the episode. So I hope you've had a good week. I've had a good week now, especially since we've had a chat. So if you liked the video, definitely hit the like button. We'll be back again next week, every Thursday, like clockwork. So feel free to subscribe, and you can hit that bell notification, and that will let you know when the next video uploads. Otherwise, frankly, just come back every Thursday and I'll see you here. Until then, have a great week and catch you on the flip side. Goodbye.